Hello again, friends and supporters. This is another edition of SCLC Today TV. I'm Maynard Eaton, and of course, our president and CEO, Dr. Charles Steele Jr. Dr. Steele, this week, $4 billion fund for socially disadvantaged farmers, black farmers, farmers of color. You might suggest that's a much-deserved reparation for their how they've been treated over the years.
Absolutely. It can set the format in terms of other aspects of careers and occupation that we as African Americans and people of color and poor people been left out of the process and been disenfranchised. Every day, man, it's a fight and a struggle to fight, racism. And we just have to stay on top of it. Many times, with this type of opportunity with the black farmers, we just have to chip away. And as we chip away with the farmers, we have to chip away with education, business community. The black farmer is an institution that we all depended upon. Many a times it was a family business. And you had the children out there working in the farm, and not to mention the fall of the season in terms of the harvesting of cotton. I can remember cotton very vividly because it was a cotton field right in the back of our home when I was a young boy in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And many times the children who was picking the cotton wouldn't come to school until October. They missed all of September. And that was all of the children. That was the mom and dad and the grandkids. It was a family business. And that's what sustained us. My wife's father, both her fathers were big time timbermen as well as being farmers themselves. So I have the experience of being related and married into a family that was very big farmers. But all of that evaporated, was eradicated from this system. And then there were other farmers of the Caucasian race who actually got paid when every so many years you have to change the crops that you are growing because it wouldn't be successful or sustainable if you continue to grow a particular crop for so many years. But during that absence, while they were not growing the crops, they were subsidized by the federal government, man. And they didn't call it welfare. They said the farmers being subsidized, but there were not any black farmers to a large degree because they all went out of business because of the system.
Only 1.4% of farmers are black now. It used to be as much as 30%. I was raised on a farm during my youth. My grandfather was a farmer. My great-grandfather was a farmer. That farm is gone, like many other black farmers are gone. I just think, but yet today we read there's a backlash for some white farmers because blacks are getting this long overdue help. What do you say to that?
It's all about, absolutely, it's all about economics. And many people are afraid to call it what it is. It's white supremacy and racism. How you going to correct what the problem is if you don't talk about it and call it, if it's a duck and it's quack and it look like a duck and it walk like a duck, fly like a duck, it is a duck. It's not a geese, it's a duck.
Talk about racism and white supremacy. Right in our backyard on Stone Mountain, the biggest representation of civil rights heroes, so-called. Now there's been a vote to be a Tell the Truth Museum. The rebel flags coming down. Is that long overdue? And what does that say, do you think, about this day and time?
Well, it's not enough, but it's a start. Dealing with the imagery, I can't help when you say Stone Mountain, think about the Trail of Tears with the Indians. Think about it, man. It started at Stone Mountain when they had the Trail of Tears, and they forcefully moved all of the Indians out of the southeast into Oklahoma. And you're talking about 16,000 Indians, and you're talking about 5,000 lost their lives on the transition of disease and illness and just giving out of the motivation and giving up and just laid on the wayside and died. That was done for a conspiracy of racism to give white landowners the best piece of land that they could own. It sounds like to me in 1862, the Homestead Act, which was made available for everybody, but people in agriculture, domestic workers, and people of the Negroid race, black folks. So nothing has changed. Everything is still the same.
Would you say that also about 1 year later from the George Floyd murder, if you will? This is a 1 year anniversary of George Floyd being killed. His family's at the White House this week. There's still a call for police reform. The George Floyd Police Reform Act has still not been passed. What has happened, you think, in that year? What does his death mean, you think? Some say it's changed the world. I've heard of people say that. What say you, sir?
What I think is that the impact has really made a difference, a great difference. What you have to refer back, always use references. We've been here before. You see, always use that. What comes to mind is Jimmy Lee Jackson out of Marion, Alabama, which the march took place from Selma to Montgomery, which brought about the 1965 Voter Rights Act. And today, man, even though we gained that act, we lost it in 2013. It was gutted. The 1965 Voter Rights Act was gutted. Section 4 and Section 5. That's why you have now the suppression of the vote. But it was Jimmy Lee Jackson that we got behind and rallied and brought this opportunity for us to have the right to vote. What am I saying? We cannot rest on our laurels, even with that terrible tragedy that we had with none other than Mr. Floyd, George Floyd. I get what Dr. Joseph Lowry called is the 51st state. You know, many folks think it's 50 states, but we have 51 states, and that's the state of denial. We, in a few years, will deny that certain things ever happen. You know what I'm saying? I'm from Daly Bottom, Alabama, in the alley, not just Daly Bottom, but in the alley. I cannot get amnesia on that, sir.
But has George Floyd's death and the subsequent protest ushered in a new era of civil rights, you think? A new, younger era of civil rights?
Absolutely. But is it sustainable? Jimmy Lee Jackson brought in a new era of civil rights. That's what I just used as an example. Jimmy Lee Jackson was gunned down in Marion, Alabama, in a night march, marching to have the right to vote. And when his grandmother and grandfather, along with his mother, ran into this cafe that we called back then a juke joint, a cafe with the music, rock cola, and selling cheeseburger, hamburger. They ran into the cafe, and there the state troopers pursued them. And one of the state troopers took out his baton to hit them, his grandmother and grandfather, and he got in the way and blocked that blow. And that's when the state trooper shot and killed him. That's when it was suggested, after he died 4 or 5 days later, from Marion, Alabama, an elderly lady said, let's march and take his body all the way to George Wallace and put it on the state capitol. That's what brought about the 1965 Voter Rights Act. It wasn't planned. The registration of getting folks to vote was planned, but not to march from Selma to Montgomery. But it started in Marion, Alabama, which get left out of history. It was in Marion, Alabama. And that's where Jimmy Lee Jackson was killed. That's what brought about the 1965 Voter Rights Act. And all I'm saying, we as a people live in the 51st state of denial because we never talk about his name. Where are you from, man? I'm from the state of denial because you have forgotten. We have to always be reminded and refreshing in terms of our history. Jimmy Lee Jackson George Floyd.
Sure. George Curry is a noted journalist. You're a good friend. I'm a journalist. But many journalists are now comparing, some at least are comparing, George Floyd's death to what may occur after Martin Luther King Jr.'s death. I don't know if that's quite the truth yet. Do you see that, the aftermath of his death having the same future impact as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.?
Well, Dr. King is in a category by himself. And you can never use any example other than Jesus Christ. And I'm big on that to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That's my comparison. So we have to be very careful in terms of recognizing the significance of one who gave the supreme sacrifice and was pretty much planned to die and was warned that we gonna get you in Memphis. But the fact was, he was a prophet. He was called by God to be a minister. He was a pastor. And he was a visionary. Dr. King said, I won't get there with you to the promised land. But as a people, we will get there. That was the night before he was assassinated. He envisioned where we were and where we're going to go. Let me tell you something else he said, Mr. Heaton. He was talking to Harry Belafonte, and that was a year before he was assassinated. And he said, Harry, being a visionary, he said, I feel that I have brought my people and integrated them into a burning house. The house is on fire, and I led them there. And Harry asked him the question, what are you going to do about Martin? He said, we must be the ones to put the fire out. So the house is still being inflamed, inflammatorily. We are still in a burning house. But what are we going to do about it to put the house out? We got to be the fire marshals. We got to be the firemen, as well as the leaders of justice and equality in a spiritual way, in the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost. I'll never get away from my Christianity, because that's what has kept us as long as we have in terms of sustainability. Many times we forget about God, but it's all about God. And if you got the faith, you don't mind dying if you know God anointed you to do the work. Have you been anointed? I ask America, and particularly African Americans.
Woo, yes, Pastor. But I want you talking about a burning issue. You talking about a burning house. A burning issue is one about voter suppression. And SCLC is involved with the NAACP, the Legal Defense Fund, in a case in Georgia. But it's not just Georgia where we were fighting this issue. It's in court there. But you're saying this case resonates across the country. Is that correct?
Yeah, right. And we're so thankful for none other than Attorney Randa Gaines, along with Professor Attorney Marilyn Ford, our General Counsel, Attorney Charles Brooks, and Chairman Dr. Bernard Lafayette, who actually brought us together and said, let's just talk legally through this. Now, I have to admit, I'm a direct action man. And I don't just deal with the legalization of just saying, because it was the law that kept us in slavery. It was the law that brought about the Jim Crow-ism, and the federal government allowed it to happen. So I'm not one just hung up on saying, because the law says this. The law said, and we didn't even have to have a 1965 Voter Rights Act. If you're a citizen of this country, you have the right and the freedom as a citizen for the right to vote.
Dr. Steele, you're a civil rights leader, as was Dr. King and others of your ilk. But now, for the first time ever, we have a black woman who's the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. Her name is Christine Clark. I know it's got to make you, your wife, and your daughters very proud.
Absolutely. It is great, and I think she's going to do a great job in terms of her background and in terms of the anticipation. And to give credit to the current administration, that this envision what the dream is all about. But it goes further than that, Mr. Eden. It goes to the point that we got to get something done. We had a lot of people in position of color, and that's fine. But I'm talking about right now. We got to get something done, and not just having a meeting with the civil rights leaders or this group and stuff. Some type of envision from this current administration need to come without hesitation and just initiation, and to show that this is what we're going to do. You know, we have talked ourselves to death, but it's all about action. And I believe that Attorney Clark will be about action.
So it's not just historic. It's not her being there. It's what she does, I hear you saying.
Absolutely. And it's applaudable. We applaud it. But people are hurting out here. And racism is running very rampantly throughout our system as well as the world. And basically, America is the leader of the world. Show us what you got in terms of not being rhetorical, in terms of the cliches and the expressions. It's all about action. You know, I believe in people standing up and not just saying who you are, but showing who you are. You know who did the best of that? Jesus and Dr. King.
Dr. Steele, we salute you. We salute Christine Clark. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another edition of SCLC Today TV. We'll see you next week.